Along with the regular Landumc Goes There videos, this series called Music Memories will be a group of videos that hopes to spark the memories that are stimulated by the songs that you grew up with. And my bet is that you'll enjoy looking back on the music that you grew to love in your youth. The American folk music revival of the late 50s and early 60s was dramatically interrupted by the counterculture and music of the British invasion. The Beach Boys, the Byrds, the Turtles, and the Association were a new breed of groups as America formulated its musical answer to this invasion. This new sound, known as folk pop, produced numerous songs which competed for the highest positions in the top 40 each week, both in the United States and in England. The MAMAS and the PAPAS would also be a contributing voice to this musical response of the 60s. Their unique sound was largely based on vocal harmonies and arrangements by songwriter and musician John Phillips. It was his particular mixing of their male and female voices that became their trademark. Though hesitant to leave folk music at first, he adapted the former sound of folk to the new beat style of the 60s. All four members, John Phillips, Cass Elliott, Michelle Phillips, Denny Dortree, came out of the folk music revival movement. John Phillips had been a member of the folk trio group called the Journeymen from 1961 to 64. The group also featured Dick Weisman and Scott McKenzie. McKenzie would later record a Phillips-written song, San Francisco, in 1967. It peaked at number 4 on the American Billboard Top 40, and it reached number 1 in the UK. The Mugwumps found very little success during their short-lived time together in 1964. But the breakup of the group did launch the careers of Cass Elliott, Denny Dortree, and John Sebastian. Sebastian would soon afterwards co-found the Loving Spoonful. Michelle Phillips, born Holly Michelle Gilliam, was an aspiring model in the 1960s. While on vacation in San Francisco, she met and then married John Phillips in 1962. She was 18 years old at this time. Due to the early breakup of his earlier group, the Journeymen, John and his wife Michelle and Denny Dortree performed temporarily as the new Journeymen to fulfill some contractual obligations to Capitol Records. Michelle, never having been taught music, honed her craft while she was on the job. Time magazine would describe her voice as the purest soprano in pop music. As folk music was fading fast in the United States in general, and in New York City in particular, the threesome headed to St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands for some much-needed change of scenery. It was during this time that Denny finally persuaded John that their sound had to change from being simply acoustical. Because of the overwhelming success of the Beatles in 1964 and Bob Dylan folk music being dead for a year, Denny said, "John, we've got to go electric." They continued writing songs, rehearsing, and trying out their new sound at a local bar called Duffy's. Cass Elliott eventually joined them in St. Thomas, but John was reluctant to make her the fourth member of the group. His concerns were that her voice was too low for his arrangements, and that her obesity would be a hindrance to the group's image, and that her temperament clashed with his. In an unbelievable story, while Cass was working as a part-time waitress at Duffy's, she was struck in the head by a falling pipe. The story goes that when she recovered from this slight concussion, she was an octave higher, pleasantly to John's surprise. The four returned to the United States. Cass Elliott caught a plane to L.A. alone. John, Michelle, and Denny headed to New York by boat. By the time they reached Puerto Rico, they only had $50 left between them. They entered a casino, and they won enough to purchase first-class airfare to New York City. It's not long after arriving in New York that the group became anxious to try out their new sound. Not in New York City, though, but in L.A. Cass Elliott's friend Barry, Eve of Destruction McGuire, arranges an audition with producer Lou Adler, co-owner of Dunhill Records. Following the audition, Adler asked them to return the very next day. Upon returning, contracts were all over the floor. Cass Elliott's membership in the group was not official until the contracts were signed, with Lou, Michelle, and Denny overruling John. The group considered calling themselves the Magic Circle before settling on the Mamas and the Papas. The name was inspired by the Hells Angels, whose female associates were called Mamas. Go Where You Wanna Go was the group's first single. It was given limited release in November of 1965, and it failed to chart. The Fifth Dimension covered the song in 1967, and it became a top 20 hit. But it didn't take long for the group to strike gold. Released the very next month, on December 18, 1965, California Dreaming peaked at number 4 in the U.S. and number 23 in the U.K. But it wasn't a breakthrough hit initially. It caught very little attention in the L.A. area. It was actually a Boston radio station that catapulted the song into the nation's ear, giving the song extraordinary amounts of playtime. The first lyrics of the song were written by John and Michelle 2 years earlier during a rather cold winter day in New York City. It was a time when Michelle was deeply missing home in Southern California. One morning, John brought the proposed first verse to Michelle. It was inspired by and based on her homesickness and her longing to be somewhere else. She would add the second verse based on a walk that she and John had gone on together in the city snow, and their stopping in a church along the way. Barry McGuire would record the first version of the song with the Mamas and the Papas as his backing vocals and with a harmonica solo. The song was going to be used as a follow-up to his hit, Eve of Destruction. The group, however, decided to record the song on its own. Denny sang lead, and some chord changes were made. The Wrecking Crew's P.F. Sloan was brought in to play the guitar chords. In the intro to the lyrics, Bud Shank replaced the harmonica solo, which John didn't care for, with an alto flute solo. Dunhill Records was so impressed with the changes and the results that they held off on Barry McGuire's version and decided to produce the new version instead. The church that John and Michelle had stopped in was St. Patrick's Cathedral. John disliked the lyrics to the second verse because he was completely turned off by church and religion altogether. Both prompted unpleasant memories of parochial military schools as a child. He told Michelle he didn't like the lyric "stopped into a church" and asked her to rewrite it. But Denny and Cass heard the second verse, and they wanted those lyrics left in. And now we're all certainly glad they did. When John and Michelle stopped into the church along the way, did he or she get down on their knees and begin to pray, or pretend to pray? Both phrases have been faithfully sung. I've even read conflicting accounts from the members themselves as to which one is correct. The Mamas and the Papas were by no means a one-hit wonder group with California Dreaming. They entertained us for many years with many memorable songs like Monday, Monday, I Saw Her Again Last Night, Creaky Alley, Dream a Little Dream of Me, and Dedicated to the One I Love. The unique harmonies and the timeless songs will forever send us back to cherished memories of our younger, more innocent years of life. A special thank you to the Mamas and the Papas. Thank you so much for watching this first episode of Music Memories.